Good afternoon. A wonderful time for all us to be alive and to be on this planet, especially because we have a great story to tell, each one of us that have at least 25 years and older. We have seen some wonderful things, some not so wonderful things. We have experienced many story in our life. They are worth to remember, and some they are maybe borderline want to forget. But our job as humans is always to find the next silver lining, and also to celebrate what's amazing, what's great, what is a part of a life that is worth celebrate. I personally remember specifically my time, September 11. I was in Italy vacation with my family. I was very fortunate because I sold my restaurant, Amici Trattoria, and for quite a bit. And I was very happy. I was taking a 6 months of leave absent from my artistry and my passions and love, and I pursue my biggest of all passion, which is traveling and sharing with my family. My kids were young those days, and Massimo and Isabella, and my wife Veronica, of course, my ex-wife now, but still the same wonderful human being that I had 23 wonderful years together, and many wonderful things to celebrate and to be joyful for. A gift, like all things in our life. I believe that most things in our life are contributing. They are positive. They makes us to the next step, the next level, who we're gonna be. Allows to enlarge our experience as human beings, and to enrich our life in so many different ways. Positive and negatives are forces, and those forces are amazing because sometimes makes us uncomfortable. So to think about through those issues, and as well as makes us happy because it gives us a different perspective what life is about and what life can be, and the things that we need to learn as human beings to be better father, better husband, better friends, better human beings, better countrymen too. I remember I was in my hometown Alvignano, and I went to little the bigger village, which is Caserta. They have all the shops, and there's beautiful great area of Piazza, the Corso. It's called Corso Emanuele, and they have all the beautiful shopping. I wanted to go buy some shoes for my kids. At the time, I don't know, there was something called Elefantina. I don't know. I mean, kids' shoes drives me crazy because their feet keep on growing all the time. It's like one of the biggest waste of investment. Maybe you should send them shoeless until they get to a point where they stop growing, and then you buy them a Bruno Magni or a nice little chimmy shoe for the girls, and get over with it, because the investment we make along the way is amazing. Anyway, they are cute, they're beautiful, and we got into Caserta early, around 8 o'clock, and because there was a pasticceria right around the corner in Van Vitelli Square, and they make a fantastic sfogliatella, which is a classic Napolitan pastry, flaky with filling inside of rice and zabaglione. I mean, just fantastic, and a nice cappuccino. So I was very excited. And I got to the Piazza Vanvitelli. I got my sfogliatella, the cappuccino. My kids were excited. They stuffed their face with all the pastry. And then we walked down the Corso. The shop had just opened early on. I don't remember the hours, 9:30 or so, somewhere around. And I walk inside, and we're talking English with my kids and my wife, of course. And the shop owner came up to me, and he goes, "Hey, Massimo," because she heard my name. And he goes, "Hey, Massimo, are you from America?" I say, "Yeah, I live in America. What's happened?" Kind of like very unusual. 9:30 in the morning, somebody asks if you're from America. Well, he goes, "Well, you wanna call home? There's something really bad happened." I said, "What are you talking about? You don't even know me. What do you mean something bad happened to me?" I'm just had a cappuccino for Yatella. I'm in a good place right now. Don't ruin it for me. And you have to understand, even when I'm sarcastic, I always have a chuckle and smile because I see humor in everything, not because I'm insensitive, it's just because that's who I am. And so she goes, no, 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 seriously, something really bad happened. The Americans on the attack. And I go like, okay, now we're starting with this nonsense. And so, but she had such a frightened look in her face that I had to believe her. So I say, listen, there's any place where they have they sell um, they sell TV and things. She says, yeah, there's a two-story down. So I rushed down, and they were the store with all the television, and the only thing they had at the time was the Italian commentator over speaking over the English translation, which was horrendous, by the way, because it was just no way that whatever the guy was saying in Italian was reflecting what the guy was saying on CNN or whatever that was. And so, because it was a multi-television, and he was saying, 20 airplane was bombarding in America, I was like, okay, this is Pearl Harbor over again. What is going on? I just left the country for a couple months. It's not possible. And so at that point, I told my wife, listen, let's go in the car, let's go home, let's find out what's going on. Because we had basically two departure a couple days later. We were ready to finish our trip. And we had another guest with us, Jack Anderson, who was one of my friends. They came along with me in vacation, and he was going already in Rome. So he was in Rome to take the plane to go to the States. And actually was going to Heathrow, and then from Heathrow go back to Los Angeles. And so I went home, and finally, of course, we know the story. The towers and the first Italian. Basically, we were in a phase one World War III. We were attacked, and then of course, once I got the real story, I understood very clearly that the disaster happened to us. And so my friend Jack called me stuck in the airport, no flying anywhere. Of course, we had to call and change our fly arrangement. Of course, that's no big deal. It was just very sad because we didn't know where to go to. And this brings me to some of the things that in our life are so petty and so small, especially when we see political people, wrangling over who's better for us and who's not. And I understand all things are important. Everybody's got their own love and passions, and of course, mine is wine. As you know, wine people. I love talk about things that brings joy in our life, but there are those moments that we have to recognize. They are very important. They are very indelible. They stay seared in our memories, and we don't want to forget our brothers and sisters lost in these moments in time ever. This is horrible, and it's no fault of their own. They just be in the wrong place in the wrong time. So that is my prayer. That is my dedication. I don't want to be overlooking such an important moment with some frivolous conversation that I'm going to have in 5 minutes with you. And I just want to make sure that the somber and most important moment in our lives in this time. I mean, we are a part of the history, and this will be down the history book, hopefully, because let's hope that the cancel culture doesn't try to cancel this too, and related to I don't know, white privilege or some supremacy bullshit. Because honestly, at the end of the day, it's just horrific when a group of people, due to their distorted, poisoned ideology, they take their grief on the human life, poor human innocent life. They have nothing to do with anything, and in most cases, they were people of all kinds of race, color, and creed. And so that's just a paragraph of our a very important one, by the way, very important one of our history that it needs to be remembered. And of course, part of the reason why I was in Italy is because I went to the city of Verona, one of my favorite city in Italy, for many reasons. Verona, it's a jewel. It's truly a jewel. It's one part is surrounded by the Adige River, and the other one the walls. And it's absolutely romantic. It's beautiful. The central town, it's all pedestrian. So with the kids, it was amazing because they can walk around and look and play. Beautiful store. There's one of the greatest amphitheater in Italy, still active. If you love opera, if you love chamber music and concerto music. That is one of the best places you can be. That and of course Taormina in the summer. In the spring, late spring, they begins the stagione musicale in the amphitheater, and some of the biggest name have sang there or play there. Zumi Mesa, Pavarotti, Zeffirelli had made one of the greatest productions of the Aida, which is one of the biggest opera by Verdi. But the city itself is intimate, it's beautiful, it's kind, it's got some gentleness to it. And of course, Verona was part of the biggest picture, was part of Venice. In fact, you'll see the Lions of Venice and the flag of the Book of the Lions of Venice because it was part of the Venice domain, Domini Veneti. In fact, they used to call whatever the Venetian Doge, the big guns. So Venice was known as a very libertine, a very avant-garde for the time of a civilization. In fact, Venice was a quite it was naval power, and they have a great commerce, and they had far reach all over the Mediterranean beyond. One of the things about this particular part of the history is very important because what they did is they improved commerce all over, and you can see the trace of the particular things. And one thing period you will notice in the period is something very unique. We use today the term high society, and a lot of people don't think about it. Where does that came from? What's a high society? What does that mean? Well, if you go to Verona and also in Venice, you will notice right away that there is a bridge in between homes to homes, house to house. And of course, part of this you have to understand in this period, 14, 16, 1700, there were horsing and buggies and carriage around. So there was a lot of animals walking on the street with a lot of the passage on the street. So it wasn't quite brilliant and clean. It was a lot of smell and just the sound of today we have smog, then we had the crap. So we always have to change one thing for the others. But with the difference is you step in it. And so people, the noblesse, the people that had the money, the connections, they built the bridges to house. That way they don't have to walk among the poor people, among the plebeians, the little people, and of course now walking in the poop. So they used to walk above in those bridges, and that's what they call high society. The society that live above everybody else. So today we call those elite because, there's always been there. Then nothing ever changed. I love when human, those wonderful professors, from very accredited university from Sorbonne to Harvard. Those places with people learn wonderful things and they tell us how to live a life. But we don't listen to them. You see the French accent? Yeah, of course. Because Sorbonne is supposed to be one of the first university where the snobbery began. And people with many knowledges, they disperse through the populace and let us a little bit into the stories. However, the truth of the matter is, history is made by the populace most of the time. Because once we get pissed off, then the end is near, like Frank Sinatra used to say. And just like the old saying, the shit hit the fan. So whatever is on the ground will go up in the sky. Here's the beauty above Verona. Verona, it's fantastic because it's also known through the Roman Empire as one of the most beautiful places in the north of Italy during the war of the Cisalpine War, which a lot of people don't have recollection. They weren't there. It was the Romans when they tried. Well, no, they actually did. They invaded the Alps and beyond. So they got those barbarians. We call today French and Germans. We got their barbarian. Hopefully, they were running around with a bunch of leathers around their butts, and we basically civilized them, helped them out. Of course, it wasn't easy. They didn't did it voluntarily. We just forced our hands a little bit. For people, student of history, they should know that that stuff, the ugliness was going on and on from the very beginning. So, but during the War of the Cisalpines, which was a long way from Rome, and The general Catullo came back into the Lake Garda region where Verona is situated, and he noticed something: the differentiation in between the weather on the way down. It was about 10 degrees. It was warmer, was nicer. Especially when you think about the Alps, you're talking about cold, long, snowy winter, which is not easy when you walk by foot. And it's pretty damn miserable if you want to know the truth, especially if you were a soldier walking with sandals and not fancy Ogie boots. I mean, was a little bit different army than what we got now. You know, we got big trucks and things. Those days, it was by horse, by ox, and then by foot. So when they came to the area of Lake Garda, they realized immediately that it was a special place, because basically Lake Garda is a volcano filled with water, and so the volcanic activity bring out a lot of the sulfuric emanations, where actually it's very good for you. It slows down your heartbeat, but also cures your wound. And so Catullo built his own villa right on the edge of Lake in Sirmione, and when you look on the right side of Lake Garda in Catullo region, you see the Valpolicella areas, and here we go. So Valpolicella, what is it? Valpolicella is the area where the wine Valpolicella is known for, and there is a fantastic wine that we also know today as Amarone di Villa Valpolicella. You know, when I started the conversation, it was about an accident or by design. And there's two very interesting stories about the Amarone. We do know from the 1100s, that 11th century, that the Amarone didn't exist. The Recioto did. So Recioto was the grapes. They picked up the cluster outside the grapes. They pick up the monks. They took the little perfect cluster on the side, which in the dialect is called reccia, the ears of the grape. So you take a look on the cluster behind me, and you notice there is the cluster himself, but then there are two small clusters on the side. Those are the ears. So those are the perfect one because they're separated for the main cluster, and so they are ripening nicely. There is no molding possibility, or very little or nothing at all. And so the monks, they took out the small cluster on the side, the reccia, and they put them in a straw to dry. They concentrated basically the fruit. They allowed the essiccations of the water. That way it has more strain, more alcohol, more sugar. And then the rest of the cluster, they gave it to the farmers to make regular wines. And of course, they need it for their celebration of the Eucharist, as well as of drinking, because it was very common for working folks to have a glass of wine, and almost 2-3 times a day, whatever the time requires, because those days there were not a lot of drugs, anesthesia, so wine was a good thing. And they made a wine called Recioto. Recioto was a very important wine because it was a sacramental wine. It was a wine that they made for, just like Sacrantino, they made it for their celebrations. And also something very interesting, because during those period, there were a lot of pilgrims. And, the church or the abbey, they had a dispensation that when you reach those sacred place, you cannot be pursued by laws or anything else. So you had basically hospitality. And one of the things they noticed right away, that they gave a little bit of the Recioto, and people felt much better because there's a lot of sugar and energy. So it was only during the period around the 1950, 1960 that we first start hearing about Amarone del Recioto della Valpolicella. In fact, if you want to target or understand from a collector standpoint, if you have a bottle of Amarone who says Amarone di Recioto della Valpolicella, that's typically around the years of 1950 to 1980, somewhere around that time. Because then after that, they drop the Recioto words and they just go Amarone della Valpolicella, which is basically the indication of the area where it comes from. But what is Amarone? Amarone translated literally of a big bitter, but also amare, it's to love. So amaro means bitter, amare means love. We go back to the whole story of Giano Bifronde, the same part of the same coin, about two faces. love it can be bitter sometimes. We all know, we've been there. People that be in love, they also know they had a little bitter aftertaste sometime. So why is this so important? Because as we just mentioned, Recioto was the wine I made. What is a Recioto? Recioto is very highly concentrated, fruity wine with the tons of cherry, blackberries, wonderful mulberry, little notes of a chocolate. Very, very rich, sumptuous, voluptuous wine. In fact, it's the only wine that you can drink like with the chocolate and big, big herborated cheese like Roquefort, blue cheese, Gorgonzola. In fact, I will personally always prefer Recioto on port because it's not being cut with brandy or the alcohol. It's actually a straightforward wine, but it's very rich, very beautiful on the palate. And so the technique to make Recioto, it's pretty much kind of simplistic but difficult because it takes a lot of labor of love. You have to make sure that the cluster, the little recha, little grapes, don't get rotten. So you have to do a lot of hand labors and so on. So the other part of it is when they used to, in the old days, they used to do skin, stems, and seeds. They call all clusters. So when you do the all clusters, then what happened during the fermentation, which is really a violent fermentation because this is high in sugar, so it pushes up the cup. It forms this big barrier. So when it pushes up the cup, if you let it up, it will basically burn very fast, and the wine will be very dry because you're burning out quickly all the sugar. So the technique was to every 2 to 4 hours they just punch it down. They call punch down. So they actually literally took a stick with like a fork in the front, and I did as a kids all the time. So you push the cup down, then the juice comes above and keeps it down. So it slow down fermentation so that you can actually control the amount of sugar that is remain into the fermentation portion, so that the wine will decide to be either fruity or dry. Remember, fruity or dry. So it all depends on the amount of fast you burn out the sugar content. And sometimes you still maintain a certain unfermented particles of the yeast. So apparently, and this goes back to Bertani family, where that job was given because they have to do 2 to 4 hours. You basically have to be all night long, all day long. So they give that job, like they did in my family, to the younger one, usually to teenagers. And so basically the teenagers, because they don't do anything else during the day, or especially, or they go to school, they can fall asleep on the bench. It's no big deal. But the old guys, the father and the uncles, they have to go work in the field. And so apparently, the young son of the Bertani, or one of the family, he had a different business that night. He must have had a good date, so he forgot to go stay and punch down the grapes. He was punching something else and had a good time, but he would never tell the parents that he wasn't there all night long. So he let it go. He didn't tell much of it. Come on, you can't rely on teenage for that stuff. So because the fermentation goes on for a very long period, it's about sometime 14, 15 days, sometime 10 days, depends on the process. But for the Recioto, it's pretty long because you want to keep on punching down and make sure they maintain. So for all that period, and the kids never, he had many dates, so some he punched down, some he didn't. So once they actually made the wine and they went to taste it, their expression was like, wow, questo è un Amarone. This is very bitter. Now, you have to keep in mind, it's very bitter in relation to Recioto. But then they look at each other and goes like, però è molto amabile. It's very lovely. So they call Amarone. So the bigger bitter with love. So was that an accident, and that's just a story? Or it was made by design? Either way, the end result was this amazing wine born out of, I really believe it was a wine that was made just for pleasure. Because most wine, they're born out of tradition, they're born out of just logistics, terroir, where you're from. But Amarone is a construct wine. It's a wine that was made to absolutely enjoy. Big, thick, rich, tons of profile flavors from plum to dark chocolate, spice, note of vanilla and esoteric things like cinnamon and a great touch of a nutmeg. It depends a little bit what time, where it is, how they age. In the early days, they used to age in a cherry barrels, so it had even more unique flavor to it. Nowadays, of course, most of it was always big barrels. They never did in a small barrique. Nowadays, some of the more modern Amarone makers, and of course, the first guy who started all was actually the greatest Romano dal Forno, which it's a very good personal friend and incredible winemaker. His Amarone is, I think, is beyond Amarone. At this point, is one of the most classic, unique wine in the world. But in fact, I taste this Valpolicella and I will put against any Amarone. That's a great and intense the wine is. But we will talk about Alforno in another time because it requires really a special time to talk about it, because what it does is insane. It's unique, and it's what the uniqueness about humanity is about. When one human being decides to do something that nobody else will dare, something can happen. Either is a foolish or is a genius, one or the others. And sometimes it's a foolish genius. It depends on what it is. In this case of Dalforno, he's a foolish genius, but he's a genius after all, and the one is a spectacular. But he worked for another greatest genius of our time and passed on, Giuseppe Quintarelli, which in his case, he was in Negrar. So he made more the classic Amarone, which is a big body with a big flavor. But in this particular case, he created something that we, in Amarone, the people that love Amarone will worship Quintarelli, because with all that grand body, all that wonderful, impactful flavors, all that richness, and yet there was something ethereal, something very elegant, something that you have to chase, almost like a butterfly wings touches your tongue. To me, that is a sign of a sensibility that you rarely find in winemaking, because you are talking about a grapes that is being dried 30-40%. So there is an incredible amount of matter, of compounds, that is unbelievable concentrated. So for you to have the ability to create a wine that has both that concentration and the eternities, it's quite head scratching. And that's probably why I lost my hair, because I keep on scratching my head when I see something amazing, crazy or not. In any case, when you're talking about the classic Amarone, the Bertani, the Masi, Venturini, Accordini, some of the more classic Amarone, you know pretty much what to expect. It's almost a center cast character, It's like when you watch an Italian movie, you know what the benchmark is. Marcello Mastroianni for the good-looking Italian, the crazy-looking, crazy actor guys with Aldo Fabrizi. So there's a central team that runs right across the greatest Amarone. And then you have these amazing revelations on both sides of the aisle, the Quintarelli side and the Dalforno side. And I ask Romano, Romano Dalforno, why such a unique and difference? And he says, that was my respect that I did for El Vecchio, that's what they're called, the old man, Giuseppe, because I didn't want to copy his wine. I didn't want to make a better wine than he did in the same profile. I want to pay homage to this geniality, but I want to make a wine of my own, something that I firmly believed that was necessary to say about Amarone. I want Amarone to be so amazing, powerful, so impactful that you would never have to question the perfections of the wine. So basically, when I look at Dalforno as an Amarone, I look at a vertical pole. You drink it from the beginning to the end. There's always the same intensity. There's never change. With the Quintarelli is different, and with the classic Amarone is even more different. You get a certain flavor profile that is really impactful, really wonderful, and then there's a version that changes during the drinkability or during the pairing with the food, which is classic. That's what should be. It should happen in some case, but because no all Amarone are born equal. In the case of Dalforno, is definitely not born equal. There's certain unique case to be made. This wine is something of amazing, unique, special way of being made, and also the way it drinks. I just opened a 2000 and a 2006 of Dalforno, and I'm telling you, the impact, it's memorable. It's something that sometimes people ask me, do you think there's a difference in between one wine and the others, and the people will know the difference? I always tell people, of course it is. I'm going to take a little pause and come right back. So, was an accident? It was by design. So, in life, most accidents are by design. If you believe in pathos, like the Greek do, that means that there's never something that happen accidental. It's just that there is a progression, evolution of things that happens. And I think that's probably the case. I love the story of the young Italian rascal, but I think ultimately there's been many attempts. In fact, even beyond the Amarone, there was created another wine that's called ripasso, or to do. So what they did is they took the highly concentrated pomace of the Recioto, and they actually put it back into the Valpolicella to give it that extra oomph. In many cases, it was to create a wine of a much bigger shoulder, much more mouthfeel than a typical Valpolicella. Sometimes it's just a straightforward and nice, beautiful wine to drink every day. Of course, we're talking a wine that is made by 3 grapes, the Corvina, Corvinone, Rondinella, and sometimes Molinara, but many cases, actually, the Corvina is the much bigger story because it's the one who drives in the whole blend. In some cases, you also they put a Solana, which is the other, or Solana, which is the other grapes that some people experiment in singularity. They make a single grape. But Corvina, also 100% Corvina, has got this really nice, rustic, big mouth feel. But in a blend for the Amarone, I think the balance, it's really about the ripeness and the concentrations at the time. So whether it was an accident or by design, what we've been gifted is one of the greatest wine in the world, and I really believe so. I know that some people, they like to stretch the conversation always about Burgundies and Bordeaux's, and it's boring. People, please stop. Life is full of wonderful things. We don't have just the chairs. We have a couch. We got sofas. We got ottoman. We have all kinds of things, and everything makes sense in the right place in the right time. I was having a dinner last night with some of my guests, and we were drinking Amarone, and then obviously I opened a bottle of Recioto. I made a beautiful chocolate tart, pure Creole, 70%, the chocolate tart, very simple. And they asked me, because I really don't like sweet wine. In fact, I'm not really a big fan of port, but this wine is very unique. And why is that? I said, because you're having it with chocolate, with dark chocolate. And so what happened is the concentration of tannins in the chocolate attacks the fruit, or vice versa. The fruit attacks the tannins. And what happened is the wine is balanced in your palate. So it's got this beautiful overarch of a cherry with a little bit sweetness of a plum, but not sweet at all. And it's actually what you enjoy now is the big mouthfeel, the beautiful expansion through the palate of the wine himself, which basically you're drinking an Amarone at this point. And so that's the idea. It's not whether the wine is good or bad, it's what you do with that wine. In the right place, in the right time, every wine can have its own wonderful outcome. Unless we're talking about, whatever it is, a jug of wine. Excuse me. But if you put in the right place in the right time, you will notice that those kind of wines are really shine. And they shine in a way which you have to rethink the way you drink some wine. So my suggestion to you is if you like old style Amarone, if you like wine with a little bit age on, Amarone is a wine for you because age beautifully over time. And I actually don't mind at all a little more age on the wine, especially on Amarone, because you pick up some very esoteric sensations that you don't find in many wines. Primitivo is probably the only other wine from Maggiore d'Alcole that gives you that kind of intensity over time. But Amarone is a class on their own, and I really believe that for people that never experience Amarone, you should. It's one of those wines that should be on everybody's list. The price actually justifies. That's one of the very few wines that you can easily see why it costs as much as it does, because it takes a lot of labor, a lot of intense hand picking, hand handling, and then of course you're starting with a bunch and you end up with a quarter of a bunch or three-quarter of a bunch, half a bunch. It depends on how they make it. So there's a natural loss, and also the process. A great Amarone usually ages correctly anywhere in between 2 to 6 years. It depends on the producer and what he wants and what comes in. So there is a justification in the price that you can sincerely enjoy the wine, because it's made for pure enjoyment. This is a glass of wine that you can have with the food, big sauces, big tasty sauces, lots of great cheeses, dry cheeses with a lot of spice, a lot of flavors, or just enjoy the glass. It's made for pure pleasure. And that's what I love about Amarone, because it was intended for pure pleasure. And so, as a human, the only thing I can say, sometimes have just pure pleasure is not of a sin. It's actually a good thing. So, have a wonderful weekend. Let's just have our thoughts and prayer for the family and the people in New York and Washington and, of course, Pennsylvania and all around the world, for people that have suffered a loss. And have a bottle of Amarone, and let's drink for the best things that life offers, and also the things that life will offer in the future, because we always have to stay positive. You always have to think about tomorrow is a brand new day. You're going to write a new story. And why not start it with an Amarone? Ciao, buonasera, arrivederci.